I don't know why you say you can't hear me. But anyway, fine. Thank you very much, DG, and other colleagues who are here, members of the media, compatriots. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to explain the regulations that have just been gazetted that move the country from level 2 to level 1 from the 21st of September 2020. Indeed, it has been a difficult and testing 6 months since we first introduced the measures to reduce and mitigate the risk of the dangerous coronavirus. It is perhaps the most health and economic crisis that we will have in our lifetime. The virus has the feature of being silent, but very efficient in moving with people when people move. It also likes crowds. Where people are crowded, the virus spreads easily. And it has changed our lives forever and probably reversed some of the economic and social gains that we have registered as a democratic South Africa. But thanks to the collective efforts and sacrifices of all South Africans, we have now recorded sufficient progress to move to level 1. By observing the health and hygiene protocols, we have ensured that our limited health capacity is efficiently used and is sufficient for all those who needed care. By following the regulations, we have had to adjust our approach from time to time to respond to this virus, and it has enabled us to make the progress thus far as a nation. Let's just recall that when we moved the country from level 2 on the 18th of August, we were at 592,144 total cases. The new cases on that day were 2,258, and the new deaths were 282. As of yesterday, we were at 572,000 total cases. Now you can see that we are moving slowly, not as fast as we were before, but there were 2,128 new cases and 67 new deaths. Some of those South Africans got infected, but others lost the fight and lost their lives. Some of them were frontline workers, health and other frontline workers, who had literally placed their lives on the line on a daily basis for our safety and for our health. We'd like to extend again condolences to the families, friends, colleagues of those patriots who lost their lives. Hambani kahle maqhawe esizwe. Compatriots, we have recorded a consistent decline of infections for the past 6 weeks. And this means slowly we are departing from the eye of the storm of COVID-19. As the President announced, we have to ease a lot of restrictions and increase economic activity. However, I must stress that the virus still remains a threat because, as you know, the virus does not move. It's moved by the people. So as we ease the restrictions both in social and economic life, it means there'll be more movement of people and the risk of the virus moving is much higher. And therefore we must remember that we are in this for a long haul. We must not allow fatigue and stress to take over. Instead, we must redouble our efforts and remember that we got here through immense individual and collective sacrifice, and we must continue to wash our hands, wear our masks, and social distance. But level 1 means that the rate of infection is slower and the readiness of the health system is higher. Now let's look at what is changing. If we look at funerals were at 50 people maximum. Now we are moving the funerals to 100 people. That's the maximum. But if your venue is small and cannot take 100 people at 1.5 meters apart, then you must use half the capacity of that venue. So I hope that is very clear, that 100 is the maximum, irrespective of the venue size. But if the size is small, then you use half the capacity of that venue. And the night vigils will remain as they are. They are still not permitted. And when we come to the health protocols, they are still the same at funerals. 1.5 meters apart, the mask must still be on, sanitizing, and we must keep to those because we know that funerals are super spreaders because people, the activities at the funeral like singing, people consoling one another, it means that the chance of spread is higher. So we must keep to the health protocols. And of course, we still have to wear masks across the board. When you leave your house, you wear a mask. When you enter a building, the owner of the building must ensure that you are wearing a mask. Whether it's a mall or a government building or a private company building, you must wear a mask. That is a must. Sometimes we see that people think now that we're at level 2, we must relax. Sometimes they don't wear their masks. We must still wear our masks and wear them properly, covering the mouth and nose. And of course, the other gatherings that have been now really the restricted are now released. It's the faith gatherings. The faith gatherings, as you know, were only allowed 50 people with the social distancing, washing of hands, and a whole lot of directions. Now that is changing. Now a maximum of 250 people are allowed in the venue for the faith gatherings. It doesn't matter how big the venue, the maximum inside the venue is 250. But if the venue is too small to accommodate 250 people at 1.5 meters, then it must be less. It must be half the size of that venue. I will repeat that. The maximum you can get in a venue is 250. Or less if your venue is small and cannot accommodate 250 with the social distancing. So if your venue can't allow the social distancing, then you cannot have 250. You'll have to have less than 250. And of course, that goes for other gatherings, whether it's social gatherings inside the venue, the maximum is 250 at 1.5 meters apart, or less if the venue is small. And if the venue is small, you can't have more than half the capacity of your venue. So I hope that has been clarified. Outdoors, if you have a venue outdoors, you cannot have more than 500 people outdoors. Whether it's a faith gathering, whether it's a social gathering, whether it's a whatever gathering, outdoors, no more than 500. But still at 1.5 meters apart, still with a mask, still with your hand washing, and we must observe all the whole health protocols. And then if we come to the gyms and all those activities that were only allowed 50 people, like the gyms, the health facilities, for people who want to exercise and do all those things, there it's only 50% of the venue. 50% of the capacity of the venue. So all those economic activities that only allowed 50 people will now be at 50% of the venue. But other gatherings, weddings, and all those, it will be 250 people maximum at 1.5 meters apart. And if you can't do that in your venue, then it will have to be half the capacity of your venue. And then we come to international travel. International travel will be allowed from the 1st of October. International travel in the continent is allowed to all countries and from all countries. But other international travel, there would be a schedule of countries where the infections are high, who will not be allowed temporarily until such time that their infections come under control. But generally, it is allowed, except for those countries who will have high infections. And even for them, it's not permanent. It will depend on what happens to their infections. If they are under control, then they will also be allowed. So visa applications in our embassies will now be allowed. The long-term visas will be re-established. So the long-term visas people can then use from the 1st of October. The land borders, there were 18 land borders that were open, and they were open mainly for cargo, but now they'll be open for everything, for movement of people, for tourists, for everyone. The 18 land borders. The 35 land borders that were closed, will remain closed. So we're just opening the 18 fully so that they can take traffic for tourists, for people who are coming for anything. So we must just remember that we must use the 18 borders that are open. When it comes to international airports, it will only be the three airports: OR Tambo, King Shaka, and Cape Town. Those are the three international airports that are going to be open. The commercial seaports will be open. All the commercial seaports will be open, but they will not be open for passengers for tourism. These cruise ships and so on, those are still not allowed to offload people on our shores. The domestic travel will remain the same. The buses, the taxis, long distance is still 200 Ks, and the wearing of masks, the percentage will remain the same. But the ministers will do the direction so that people are clear. The other things that we want to stress is, of course, that when we travel, we must observe the curfew when we move around. There is still the curfew. Remember that at level 5, we were under a 24-hour curfew. And then the hours of the curfew have been diminishing with the levels. At this level, level 1, the curfew will start at 1 minute past midnight and end at 4 in the morning. So there's fewer hours of the curfew compared to where we were at level 5. So, and of course, everything will be looked at from time to time. And the president also announced issues about gender-based violence, but those will be regulated by the normal laws. They are not. They will not be regulated by the Disaster Management Act. So they are not in our regulations, but they will be in the normal regulations of other acts. So we will rely on every single one of you. We'll rely on the members of the media. We'll rely on everybody to overcome this pandemic. We have not overcome it. We have improved. The numbers are going down, but we are not out of the woods yet. So we must just be clear about that. Maybe I will just close by quoting the Director General of WHO. And before I do that, I'll just remind you of the few things that are still not permitted. There are very few now. It's night vigils. It's the borders that I talked about, the 35 borders which are still closed. It's the nightclubs. They are still closed. The initiation schools are still closed, but we'll be discussing those matters with the traditional leaders. But for now, they are still closed. The passenger ships for international leisure are still closed, as I said. Sports spectators are still not allowed. International sports is still not allowed. So, and then education, the education ministers will always deal with that in the directions. So I would like to just close by quoting the DG of WHO when he said last month, I'll quote, "We're asking everyone to treat the decision about where to go, why they do, and who they meet with as a life and death decision, because they are. It may not be your life, but your choice could be the difference between life and death of someone you love or for a complete stranger. So when you decide to leave your house, just think that you are taking a life and death decision, either for yourself or for someone you love or someone you don't know. Even as we visit our relatives and friends, we must remember that the older people are still at a higher risk and they may have comorbidities, and therefore we must protect them by wearing our mask and social distancing. Doesn't mean that you don't love the person, your mother, your father, your grandmother, your grandfather, your aunt, uncle, friends. If you don't hug them, you are protecting them. Because you may be fine, but you may be carrying the virus not knowing, because some of the people are asymptomatic. So you may be going around feeling well, having no symptoms, but you could be spreading it around. So a mask will protect them. Social distancing will protect them. So I thank you. Just ukuthi ngithi kancane nje ngesizulu, njengoba kule nyanga eziyisithupha sibe siphila impilo noko ebhlungu yokuthi sinezinto eziningi esingakwazi ukuzenza, singakwazi ukuya emsebenzini ngendlela efanele, singakwazi ukuphuma emakhaya isikhathi esiningi. So le nyanga eziyisithupha zenze esikwenzile sisonke siyisizwe, kwenza ukuthi labantu abangenwa ilesifo banciphe, nabantu abadlulayo emhlabeni ngalesifo banciphe. Ngakho ke kwenza ukuthi kuvuleleke ezinye izinto ebezisavaliwe. Kodwa ngifuna nje uqiniseka ukuthi asikapheli lesifo. Kusafuneka ukuthi sigqoke ifonyo, kusafuneka ukuthi siqaqane iqathi nohafu, kusafuneka ukuthi sigeze izandla sonke isikhathi ngoba alikapheli legciwane. Sisathola abantu abayinkulungwane 2 ngelanga abasitholayo lesifo. Yebo sekungcono kunangalesikhathi kwakuba yinkulungwane ezi13 ngelanga, kodwa asikapheli. Ngakho ke bantu bakithi asizame ukuthi singabi budedengu njengoba sesibona nje kwezinye indawo abantu sebehambela bangafaka imaski babe yixuku. Asikapheli lesifo, sisekhona. Kwamanye amazwe sesikhuphukile, kade sesehlile saya phansi, bacanga ukuthi siyaphela, badedela benza ubudedengu. Manje sesidlondlobela ukudlula lokya ababe khona ekuqaleni. So nathi ke njengoba sithi qhubekani nokubheka imigomo yezempilo, ingoba asifuni ukufika kuleso sikhathi lapho abantu abangenwa ilesifo bezophinde bakhuphuke kakhulu inani, nabadlula emhlabeni bakhuphuke kakhulu. So kodwa ke kulaba abadlulile emhlabeni, nalaba abasebenza kwezempilo, nalaba abasebenza kwezokukhusela, bonke laba kade bebeka impilo zabo engcupheni ukuze thina sisizakale. Laba abadlule emhlabeni sidlulisa ukuzwelana nabo, sithi akwehlanga lingehlanga emndenini yabo nasebanganini. Kodwa ke manje siya kwi-level yokuqala, level 1, ku level 1 imingcwabo isazoqhubeka ibe njengoba kade yenziwa. Into ezohluka nje kuphela ukuthi sebengaba yikhulu abantu abasemncwabeni. Kodwa futhi uma leyo ndawo enikuyona ingenkulu, ingakwazi ukuthatha abantu abayikhulu baqaqane babe yiqanti nohafu, kusho ukuthi kofanele babe ngaphansi kwekhulu. Imlindelo sisacela futhi ukuthi ingenzeki. Ngoba siyazi ukuthi imingcwabo nemlindelo iyo indawo la igciwane elihamba kakhulu ngoba abantu basuke babe ndawonye, kwesinye isikhathi bafuna ukuthintana. Manje mabe baningi kakhulu kusho ukuthi nalo legciwane lizobhebhetheka kakhulu. So siyacela ke ukuthi niqhubeke niyenze njengoba beniyenza, kodwa sebengaba yikhulu uma indawo kuhlanganelwe kuyona inkulu. Eminye izinto ezivulwayo inkonzo. Inkonzo bekuvumeleka abantu abawu-50 50. Manje hayi sekuvulekile ngoba sewungawaphinda kahlanu lamashumi 50. Okusho ukuthi sekwamakhulu 200 nabantu abamashumi 50. Uma indawo ivuma ukuthi kube ilelo nani abantu bakwazi ukuqaqana iqanti nohafu. Kusho ukuthi noma ngabe likhulu kangakanani indawo enikhonzela kuyona, kodwa anikwazi ukuba nabantu abangaphezulu kwabantu abamakhulu 250, 250. Kodwa uma indawo incane akushiwo ukuthi qinanani-ke ngoba nifuna ukufika kulo 250, cha. Uma indawo yenu incane kusho ukuthi nizoba nabantu abangaphansi kwaloko, ngoba kusafuneka ukuthi baqaqane iqanti nohafu. Kusho ukuthi ningasebenzisa uhafu waleyo ndawo, ningayigcwalisi mayincane. Kodwa makungaphandle kuyinkonzo ebanjelwa ngaphandle kungaba amakhulu 500. Kodwa noma kwamakhulu 500 kusafuneka niqaqane lapho ngaphandle. Eminye ke imicimbi njengemshado neminye nje imicimbi iyavunyelwa, kodwa kuzofuneka nakhona makungaphakathi kube amashumi 25. Uma indawo ivuma inkulu, uma incane inganivumeli ukuthi nifake abantu abamakhulu 25 kuleyo ndawo, kusho ukuthi kufanele nifake uhafu, ningayigcwalisi. Lokho ke kuzokwenzeka kuyo yonke nje imicimbi eyangaphandle, nakhona imicimbi ingabi ngaphezulu kwamashumi 500. Sorry, kwamakhulu 500. Kodwa imigomo yezempilo isalandelwa. Lawo mabhizinisi anjengokuya la kubukwa khona izithombe, amafilimu, nala kujinywa khona, zonke lezo ndawo ebezivumela abantu abamashumi 50, manje sekuzovunyelwa ukuthi zigcwalise uhafu waleyo ndawo. Zonke lezo ndawo ezamabhizinisi ebezivunyelwe abantu abamashumi 50. Lezo ndawo zinjengamasinema, namatheater, namajim nezinye ke. Bese kuthi ekuhambeni kokuya ngaphandle kweSouth Africa, ngaphandle kwelizwe lethu, sesiya eAfrika. Usungaye eAfrika noma abantu abasuke eAfrika iyonke abafuna ukuza la bangeza. Bavunyelwe. Imigomo yokuthi kufuneka benzeni izobhalwa uminister lowo oqondene njengokuthi kofuneka babe nesitifiketi esikhombisayo ukuthi abanalo leli gciwane, kofuneka bafike bascreenwe mabefika, yonke leyo mniningwane izobhalwa eceleni. Kodwa nje bonke bavunyelwe, nabaphuma kwamanye amazwe ngokunjalo kuyafana. Kodwa labo abasemazweni lapho lesifo sandlondlobele kakhulu, bona bazoke bathi nje ukumiswa isikhashana kuze leli gciwane nasemazweni nabo lehle. Uma lingakehli bazoke bathi ukumiswa. Kodwa lawo mazwe lesifo esesizingeni eliphansi njengathi, bona-ke bangavunyela ukuthi beze noma bezokwenzani, noma ibhizinisi, noma ukungcebeleka, noma ukuzofunda, noma ukuzokwenzani, ngaphandle kokuthi bezokwenza amacala. Laba bazokwenza amacala-ke hayi, noma ngabe bavela kuliphizwa asibadingi. Kodwa nje noma ubani ozile ozozijabulisa la eSouth Africa, noma ozofaka imali, uzotshala imali, noma ozokwenza ibhizinisi, usevunyelwe. Ngaphandle kwalawo mazwe ayoshiwo ukuthi lawa lesifo sisadlondlobele awakathi ukuma kancane. Indawo-ke zokuhamba amabhanoyi aphuma phesheya kusazoba ilama airport amathathu, i-OR, ne-King Shaka, ne-Cape Town. Lezi zokuphuma mawuhamba ngemoto zona kusazoba ilezi beziveli zivuliwe zihambisa zithutha imithwalo. Kodwa manje sezizovunyelwa ukuthi nabantu bahambe noma ngabe bayaphi, bayongcebeleka, noma bayokwenza ibhizinisi, noma bayafunda, noma benzani. Sekuzovunyelwa. Kodwa nakhona-ke kuzoshiwo ukuthi mawuvunyelwa fanele wenze lokhu naloku naloku. Olwandle, yonke izikhungo zolwandle ezenza amabhizinisi, commercial ports, zizovulwa zonke. Kodwa abantu abangcebelekayo abahamba ngemikhumbi abakavunyelwa. Kufanele-ke sikhumbule lokho. Nama-night club awakavunyelwa. Ney'kole lezi akuthiwa ama-initiation schools zokusoka nane azikavunyelwa. Kodwa-ke lokho kuzobe kulokuxoxwa nabantu namakhosi. Ezemfundo zizoqhubeka zona zilawulwa ongqongqoshe bezemfundo. Ezemidlalo zizoqhubeka njengoba bezinjalo, kodwa ayikeze uba khona imidlalo yabantu abaphuma phesheya, ayikeze uba khona izibukeli ey'tediyamu. Angigcine lapho-ke bese ngithi nje i-curfew ukuthi kufuneka ube sekhaya izoqala phakathi kwama-2 kuya emahoreni amane, midnight, 1 minute past midnight to 4 a.m. Kufuneka sizibonge ukuthi sesisafika la, ngoba masicabanga sikhumbule emuva. Ngesikhathi siku-level 5, i-curfew yayiwu-24 hours. Wawuphuma ngoba kukhona isidingo ngempela ukuphuma uye la uyakhona ubuye. Manje noko sesikhululekile, sekwama-hour nje lawa amane ukuthi kufanele ube sekhaya ngalawo ma-hour, ngaphandle mawune-permission, ngaphandle mawunesivumelwano sokuthi kufanele uphume, noma une-emergency yokugula noma ye-security, lokho-ke kuvunyelwe. Asibonge-ke, sibonge kakhulu nje ukuthi ngempela sisebenzisanile kwaze kwafika la sikhona. Asikaphumi engozini, kodwa sekungozi makhaza. Ngiyabonga.
Siyabonga, Minister. We will be taking questions. If I'm correct, Irene is on WhatsApp and Matikweni is on the line. So who do I start with? Irene, do you have some questions?
Yes, Chair. There are questions on the WhatsApp groups. The first questions are relating to a list of high-risk countries. The first two questions are from Mariek from AFP, is asking, when will we get a full list of countries that are seen as high risk? Do these restrictions apply to someone's nationality or a country they travel from? The second question, travel from these high-risk countries is prohibited except for business travel. Can you please clarify details on long-term work visas and their families? The second question is from Genevieve from Business Day. When will the list of countries prohibited and allowed to enter the country be finalized? The second question from Genevieve. Can we have some clarity in terms of international travel and what is needed when entering the country? Will results from rapid test be allowed? And if you don't have a test result when you land in South Africa, can you quarantine at home if you are from South Africa? The other questions are related to the liquor stores. The first question is from Vikas from Network24. Why are liquor stores only allowed to operate from Monday to Friday? Why not over the weekends as well? Do we have enough capacity in our hospital or not to move to level 1? Is this perhaps the reason for regulation regarding the sale of liquor? The second question is from John Fraser from ZA Confidential. John is asking, why are alcohol sales still prohibited at weekends? What is the logic behind this? And the second question from John, why is there no exemption for weekend sales from wine farms? The next question is from Liwayne Prince from Network24. Now that South Africa is moving to level 1, when will all public servants return to their respective offices for all areas of government to return to full operation? And what steps are being taken to prevent so-called ghost workers from entering the system? That's it for now, Chair.
Thank you. Is there anything from Matikweni or Minister can take these ones?
Yes, DG, we do have a question from
So let's take that one then.
Okay. You can go ahead.
Hello?
Yes, can you come through?
Okay. Yes, it's Mercedes Besant here. Minister, there are people who still think that the coronavirus is going to end, and it has ended. I mean, just day before yesterday, when I told the cashier at the grocery store that the president will be addressing the nation, we might be going to level 1. And she asked me if the corona is finished now. I said, no, the corona is not finished. And she asked me, when is the corona going to finish? I said, we don't even have a vaccine yet, but the coronavirus is going to be there, forever. So we don't even have a vaccine yet. And so I think people are confusing also the lockdown with the coronavirus, thinking that the lower level you go, the coronavirus is disappearing. That's one. And then my second question is that it's even, or the point I'm trying to raise, it's even shocking when you see state institutions and in government institutions where people are no longer wearing masks. I asked some of the police recently, why are you not wearing masks? I've brought it to the attention of Minister Becky Cele. I don't know what he's doing, but that is the situation. And I said, why are you not wearing masks? So when businesses and private sector, they are not complying, they are being told we are going to threaten you. They are being threatened. Who threatens government for non-compliance, like the police services, for example? And my last one is the issue, the term that is being used. I've heard the president, I hear people, and when people say it, I say, but what is this post-COVID-19? Because some people are already in their post-COVID-19 moments. That's why they are not wearing masks. What the definition of post-COVID-19? Because the coronavirus is going to be there forever. So do you also not think that that is a term which government, which the president or which you as government, you have to refrain from using? And unless for me, you can define for me what does post-COVID-19 mean?
Thank you very much. I think we'll allow the minister to respond. Thank you.
From here, or should I
I
come
think
there?
it's here, Minister. Where the cameras are.
Thank you very much for those questions. The minister's consent will table the list of the countries that still have high numbers. But of course, they'll have to work with the Minister of Health to ensure that the countries are properly identified. And they will publish them. And when they come to do their press conference, they'll give you the exact dates. I don't know what the exact dates, but it will be before we start traveling. Ideally, it should be before we get into level 1. But remember that this is not a static list. It's a list that will be changing all the time, depending. Some countries may start with low infections and go up. Some will be up and they will go down. So the list will be the schedules will be changing. It won't be just a once-off schedule. Those who have long-term visas will be now. Those visas are activated from the 1st of October. They should be able to utilize their long-term visas. The South Africans who are coming back, it will help if they comply and have a certificate, not more than 72 hours, as the president said, that shows that they are negative, because then they don't have to be quarantined if they don't have symptoms. But if people come, even when they know they should test, and they come not tested, if they need quarantine, they'll have to pay for the quarantine. So that will be also dealt with by the relevant ministers. Liquor stores. You'll recall that at some stage when the liquor was opened 24 hours and there were no restrictions, the numbers went up and the hospitals were under pressure. Now the hospitals are not so much under pressure. So you can see that even the liquor is being opened gradually. You saw at level 2, it was Monday to Thursday, but now it's Monday to Friday, because the government is trying to just be cautious as it moves forward. Before, the curfew was 10, which means places, restaurants and taverns and so on could not be opened longer, because the curfew, they had to be home by 10. But now it has increased. They have to be home by midnight. So you can see it's a gradual opening, so that we don't do it in a bang and find that there are unforeseen problems like we have learned in the past. So I've answered the liquor. The exemption from wine farms, Well, as far as I know, there are no exemptions for a particular group. Those who sell liquor on site, they are able to sell controlled by the curfew. Whether it's a wine farm, restaurant, or wine farm, whatever, they are controlled if they sell liquor for consumption on site. They are only controlled by the curfew. Public servants, the Minister of Public Service will clarify that. He will issue a circular that will clarify everything about public servants, because public servants also need to go back to work. And of course, ghost workers, normally the PERSAL system that pays workers is the one that will see if there is if it will pay those that are registered in the system. But of course, we know that the system is governed by what you feed it, garbage in, garbage out. So public servants who enter people into that system must make sure that they don't enter ghosts. But any member of the public that is aware of a ghost must let the government know, must let the police know, must let the minister in that department know. You mustn't sit with information like that. So please, if you know of ghost workers, please report them. It is true that people think as you go down the levels, the risk is lower. And that's why I was at pains to explain that the reason we are opening is not because we are out of the woods. It's because, if you recall, we started opening the levels even as numbers were going up, because we were forced by our unique situation where there is loss of poverty, unemployment, and hunger. And so we had to start opening so that people can earn a living whilst we try and save lives. That was the tight balance between saving lives and livelihoods. So it's not because the coronavirus is over. It's not. The COVID-19 is still with us. As I said, yesterday we had more than 2,000 new cases. That must tell us that it's still with us, very much so. But because of our situation, our economic situation, our poverty situation, we have to keep balancing. When there's an opportunity, we must increase the livelihoods, economic activity, whilst at the same time saving lives. In fact, it is more important than ever to wear your mask, because now people are moving everywhere. There'll be crowds, there'll be gatherings, people go and drink. It's so important to keep protecting ourselves, because if we don't protect ourselves, the numbers will go up and up and up, and we might be forced again to go back to tighter restrictions. But if we try, by all means, all of us collectively, to avoid that by sticking to wearing masks, social distancing, washing your hands, then we might be able to avert the second storm, eye of the storm. We're just moving away from the eye of the storm, but the storm is still there. COVID is still there. I take your point that we must not use the term post-COVID. I think you're right. There's no vaccine yet. There's no cure. So there's nothing that we can completely eradicate COVID when there's no vaccine, when there's no cure. So I think it's good advice that we shouldn't use that term. I accept that. So I will also pass the message on to our colleagues that there is a feeling which is proper, that it is misleading to use the term post-COVID. I think I've tried to answer the questions. Is there a second round or not?
I will check, but I think normally 2 rounds.
I was told you only have an hour today.
Colleagues, we usually take an hour, and we've already reached an hour, and I'm not sure whether there's somebody who's really, really dying to ask a question, or can we stop, because the arrangement was that we're going to finish at 3. I think, Irene, we're fine, eh? I think we are fine.
Chair, we have a couple of follow-up questions.
Minister, do you want to take?
If it's a couple, and couple means 2.
So I think let's take 2, because indeed we don't want to be unfair to the broadcasters. We set an hour.
Okay.
We'll only take 2.
Okay, thank you, Chair. The next question is from Vikas. He's asking, please explain what screening measures will be taken at Beira Post and airports. And then the next question, the next question is from Karima Brown from ENCA. What is the logic on the curfew hours? What is the rationale of this time? I think those are the 2 that are not related to the earlier questions.
Thank you very much. Minister, these are the last 2, and we close.
Thank you very much for those questions. First, the screening, those directions will be given, but it will be the general screening, your temperature, asking questions about symptoms and so on. So it will just be the general screening, but you will have to also have your 72-hour-old certificate that shows that you are not COVID positive. The logic of the curfew. 1, as I said, we still have 2,000 or more new cases a day. And we know that if people have been sitting in a tavern or even in a restaurant, you don't want people to sit there for hours and hours and hours. People, when they start drinking, getting drunk, they forget the mask, they forget social distancing, it becomes chaos. So you don't want that chaos to continue right into the morning. So we want at least people to have a time frame where they know now they have to leave that venue and go home. If there was no longer high numbers, 2,000 is actually a high number. Some of the countries that we see now, which have gone back to 10,000, they were down to a few hundreds. And they thought everything was okay. They opened wide, and now they are up. Some of them, they had their maximum at 8 something. Now they are beyond 10,000 in the next phase. So I think if we understand that we are not out of the woods, if we understand that the pandemic is still on, the storm is still on, we are just away from the eye of the storm, but the storm is still on, then it would be easier to understand that we can't just open the whole night for people to drink and sit together and for hours and hours. That's why there is still limit, even in gatherings, even in faith, even in funerals, because those would be the places that would spread the virus. But we also know that those tend to be younger people who will then go home to old people who are sitting at home, and they might give them the infection. So the logic is that the pandemic is still very much with us. So we have to go cautiously forward and open up cautiously. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Minister. We have come to the end of this briefing. And may I also remind the colleagues that we will be hosting other ministers to unpack, as the minister has indicated, their areas of the portfolios. Thank you very much.